Binary Bros Final Project Chat 501 demo. For the first use case, I'm going to be explaining use case number 1, which is a successful client login. For this example, I already have entered my username and my password. All that you need to do next is either hit login or you enter key. So, with me hitting login, we will hit our first breakpoint. In this case, it's going to be login button click. First, we are going to take in our current user. This is going to update our current user property with the text box username that was entered. Next, we're going to update a string password with the text box password that was entered. For any debugging purposes, we will hit the console write line, which will then update our username and our password in the bottom console, which you can see for any purposes for debugging. Next, we're going to hit controller.stateInfo. This is going to be the method called to our main controller. We are passing in our state, our current user, and our password. So in this case, current user is the username. Once we enter, we're going to hit the first line of tokens, our tokens array, which is a string. So what this line does is it's going to split our string that was passed in with those, which was login, Luke, and Ferguson. Next, we're going to instantiate our 4 string variables, which are currently set to null, as they will be updated properly through the else ifs later down the line. Next, we're going to hit our state line, which is going to parse the state from our string from earlier. At this point, we're going to be looking through and seeing which state we are currently at. In this case, it's going to be login. So, once we hit this point, we're then going to update the username variable and our password variable with the contents of the token array. So we'll then update the username with our username from tokens, and we're going to update our password from tokens. Then we're going to update our user property with the username in the main controller so it knows which user is currently signed in. Then we're going to hit our com_send_login method. So what this is it's going to send the login through our communication controller, which when we hit is going to format our username and our password for the user to be able to log in successfully through our server. So first line is obviously going to format what is going to be sent over to server, which is our login, state, our username, and then our password. Next, what we're going to do to help with server is to serialize the data with the JSON serializer. At this point, what this is just going to do is just going to serialize our content so that server can then use it to help with formalizing what data is needed to be sent back to us once we're through our login click. Then it just obviously will return the contents to be used in our previous method. Then we're going to hit our WebSocket send, which is the step to just send over what we just had formatted through our send. Once we have received what WebSocket has sent from our server side, we will then be going to state info again, as everything has now been successfully executed. Then we are just going to return send, which is just nothing at this point, as it's just for the later states is when this is going to be needed. As of right now, with login, it is not needed, so you'll just continue on. Now, we're going to be back to our login click, and if we continue on, we will then be hitting our display info on the login form. So this step right here with the if this is invoked as required, all this is just to see if the thread right now is a UI thread with our login form, since it is a window form. This step is just to see if it is not a UI thread, it will go in, invoke the new action, and set it to the delegate of our display info, just for main controller to be able to use. If it's already a UI thread, it will continue on and can proceed through the states like normal. So in this case, it is not a UI thread, so we are going to make sure it is. So now, once we go through, it'll see that it is. Now, the state that we're looking for is existing. The reason why it's existing is because when you first create a username and password, it'll obviously be a new user. This will say a text box that will say no account has been found or matching, so a new account has been created. This is just a pre-step that will happen. With that happening earlier, I already put my username and password in. So now I'll be considered as existing, as you can see by the state right here. Now, we're just going to keep looking through until we find a state existing, which is right here. Next, the first thing that will happen is a message box will appear. They'll say successful login, which has popped up right here. Next, what will be executed is the main window constructor, which I will not step through as it is going to take a lot of steps and a lot of unnecessary explanations as of right now, which is not going to provide any usefulness in this demonstration. Next, what will happen is then we are going to have the domain window pop up and then proceeding with having the login form be hidden. Then we're just going to update our properties, which are the text box username and text box password, to be empty. And once the form is closed, this is what will appear. But once we execute this, we'll see that we'll hide it. We'll see that when this code is executed, like normal, we'll come back to display info, and thus our main window has opened, which concludes the first use case.
For this portion of the video, I'm going to be demonstrating parts of the use case realization number 5, which is server client sync after login. I have my breakpoint here on case state login, and we're going to see how it's updating server form. So here we have this handle credentials received, and then we're going to go into our database. In here, we will skip over this until it finds the user. But once it does, I'll show you what happens. Okay, here we are. We have our user, Billy. If it wants to show. Yep, Billy. And so we'll continue. So here is setting the user status online, and we're also setting the contact holding Billy online as well. Here we have saved contents. We're going to get a step over these. All they're doing is saving to the JSON file. And then we're back into here where we will get user, but that's for our login. I'm going to skip over that part. We're first going to go down into this server form observer, where we'll see that we have this method update online users, which we'll first have to check to see if it has a invoke required, which is something to protect against cross multi-threading. We see that it is required, then we create a new action where we'll update on the server side of the user logging in. So we'll see that in a second. I think I can continue from here. Oh, yep, here. I'll pause and we'll continue whenever I can show you. So I got rid of the breakpoints. So whenever I type in Billy, Bob, and before I log in, I do want to bring up our server form here, so you can see that it updates in real time. So we do this login. Once our successful login pops up, we see that Billy is online, and we have our main window. Now the second part I want to show is whenever Joe logs in, the friend list is also updated along with server form. So I'm going to pause and get that ready. Okay, I have a breakpoint ready, so as soon as I hit login, it should automatically pull that up. Okay, we are in our communication controller. So this is after server form has been updated, and I can showcase that really quickly right over here. Oh, I guess I can't. Never mind, scratch that. So we'll step into this, which is a little method down here. We're still in the communication controller. Here, we want to set user status. This allows us to set the user status correctly. We had a little error whenever someone logged in first, and then the second person that logged in. The first person that was logged in was not updating their friend's status appropriately. So we fix that with this. So we'll step into here, and all we do is call a couple of these. We get the contact. I'm going to step over, and then we just make their status the new status. Okay, and then update in friends. It's similar. We get the users, and we will then update according to their friends list. So we'll step past this. And then, like I said, the save user, save contacts, just saving it to a JSON file so it's updated appropriately. Okay, now we're back into our send updated status. This will check for for each of the friends in the friend list to see if they are online, and that is using the WebSocket. So we're just going through here, checking for every friend. If they're online, we then want to be able to get their status. Then we would want to get the user that, so let's say Joe is logging in. We're getting their friend list, and now we're getting the friends that are online friend lists, and we are updating it appropriately. Here, this just checks to see if it's greater than or equal to 0. Otherwise, we'd have index out of bounds, so some error checking. And then we serialize the friend list, and then we're going to send it, and I think it's going to have a WebSocket error here in a moment. Yep, okay. Okay, here we have where we left off, and we see that Joe's offline again because I want to demonstrate that Joe will be changed to online whenever Joe does sign in. So let's do this. And here we are in our main controller. And we can see that the state is contact updated, and we commented out the rest because that was previous, and we realized we could just do it in one step. So let's step over. My bad. I guess it's not contact updated because that would be contact added or removed. So we'll just go over into this one, status update. So first we are deserializing the contacts, and then we are gonna, that's right here, as you can see, happening in the main controller. Ooh, I did not mean to do that. So let's step through this and step through that as well. Okay, this is the one we want. This is where it's going to be updating the client side with the new information which we received previously from updating on the server side. And I guess it did not step into it. Oh, I think it timed out. So I'm going to pause and then showcase what happens in the main window. Okay, we can continue. I think I've fixed the issue. We see that Billy's already online. Now I also wanted to bring up this Billy. That as soon as Joe's online, Billy will also be online. So we hit login, and we will go in here. We saw this, so I'm gonna step over until we reach our next breakpoint. So I think I hit continue. Successful login, and then here we are. So let's go and look at Billy. I guess we can't, but we can look at the server. Joe is online. Here is where we're going to be updating Billy's, not Joe's. When Joe logs in, we're going to be updating Billy's contact list. So we go through, we get for each of his contacts, and we're going to add. So contact here is going to be Billy, and they're going to be online. I guess we're updating Joe's list. Okay, we have that. Continue. Billy is online. And then I didn't want to pull up. Is there a breakpoint here? Okay, here we go. Now we're going to be updating. Sorry, because multi-threads and multiple online users. We're going to be updating Billy's thing now. Okay, so it's going to be the same thing. We're going to go and look through each of the contacts until we find the one we're looking for, and we're going to add to item. That is going to be contact username and contact status. And then it's going to just step through. They only have one friend. And then we can just hit continue. And now we see that Joe is online here. And we see Billy's online right here. And over here, we see this.
So first, we're gonna go into each one of the users. We have two users, P and E, and we are going to make a request to start a chat with them. They're gonna start a chat together. So
Love this.
this is the button click listener, and we're gonna step through here. First, we check the contacts list that is not empty, or no contact is selected, and if it is, we make a request to communication controller with the user and the current user and the person that's going to be added. Then we split the request, and we can see the whole request that was sent over here to the main controller. And,
I cut it down to 9.
and the main controller will choose the correct state and then send the appropriate sender and recipient. So over in the communication controller, we serialize the data, and we're going to step into it so we can see what it's doing. And then we will send that message over to the server. Now we move over to the server side. On message, receive it on chat. With chat has a single responsibility of managing the chats between different users. And then we receive the request for a new room with the two users. So we step, deserialize the data first, return the value, and then find the correct case. Over here, case 1, new room, and we get the sender and receiver. Now we need to check if they are already in a room, because we're going to get this request twice, one from the sender, one from the receiver. So first we check if they are online, and both of them are online. And now we find the first empty room. We got their room name kept, and then the members are the values. So first we check if they're in it. So first we're going to check every single room, ensure that they are not in that specific room. And this is just a for each loop. So I will pause it and skip over the iterations. After we return null because there's nothing, they're not in a room currently. So then we check if it's null. And if it's null, then we would just return that specific room that they're currently in, and it would bring up that room. But since they're not, and our current place, we don't have any members currently in the room that we're in, we try adding the members, both of them, sender and receiver, to a dictionary of members that has both of them as being online. And then for each one of those members, we're gonna get the value of their ID, their WebSocket ID, which for P is this one. And using that ID, we will send over a message, send the message out, and then we will add it to the proxy. Now we'll step into the proxy. Add to proxy is a class that will invoke an event handler. And the proxy is simply keeping the history of the chats. So let me skip this loop. And this loop was put in here because it was moving too fast for the WebSocket. So I will pause this. So now that we are in the proxy, we add that specific text to the room if it exists, and if it doesn't, then we create the room and then add the text.
We won't play.
And then we continue from that to proxy within the chat class. After we add the text to proxy, we invoke an event that will tell the server that the room has been updated. And it will pass all the rooms so the server can sort through them and figure out which room has what inside of it. So after it loops through every room, it will find the one that has people and then invoke actions to update the UI. We'll update it with the key and the users that are currently in the room. And then we return home. We return to the client side and then break out of the case. And over here, we can also see that the users are added to the specific room. Now, after the response is done, we have an on-chat message method on the communication controller, which is actually set up here as the on message for the chat responses. So once the response is obtained, it goes into that method. And then we hit the response from the server. And the server ends up sending a whole array, a whole string, asking for a new room, replying, there's a new room, it's called S, and there's 2 members in it. So we step into it, and we send the contents over to the main controller. The main controller will handle the new room. So step into it and find the new room. Find the new room. Oops, new room R. That's the response, right? We step into the response. We have the room, the sender, the recipient. And then we check if the recipient is equal to the friend, and then we join that specific room with that friend. And then we update the UI with the sender and the recipient. And then we use our custom message event args to get that message. And then the UI is updated with the invoke. So we check if we're on the correct thread. If not, we switch to the UI thread, we move over, we update it, and then we check if the update message event is null, which is not. It's the message event args that we just saw that helps us update the UI that we just saw in action. So we return the whole string, and then we set the current room to the room that we're in right now. And then we have a successful adding to the chat.
Alrighty, so I'm going to be demonstrating use case 6, which is adding the new contact. I've already put the breakpoint on where we press enter for searching up in our contact list. So let's get into it. So I'm going to just type M, and then that'll go through this because we pressed something, and then we can just step over all of that because we didn't press enter. And then it should let me go back here. And then I can press enter. And then from there, it should go into that if statement. It'll kind of format it so it's able to be sent. And then we will send it to our controller. So I'll step into that. And then from there, it'll go here and split them in half based off of the states and the different contact that you entered. So right now it's going to be empty, but once we step over, we can see that it now has, the search and then whatever we entered. And then from there, we can keep stepping over to get to the if statement where it checks for state.search, and then it'll go into that. And then it'll assign the contact name for it to be sent from our array. And then from here, we can send the search to our communication controller, which is going to be this method that we use to send. It'll check to make sure that the WebSocket's still running. And then if it's not, alrighty, so once it's sent over from the client side's communication controller, it'll be put into this array here, and then it'll call the method from what we sent over called deserialized data, which is down here, which is just going to be splitting up what we sent over to separate the state and the contact. And then we can go back up here to my breakpoint. And then we'll want to step into that to go to their controller. And then from there, it'll make that, initialize that to nothing, and then it'll get the state from the array, and then it'll go through all of these cases to check for the state we're looking for, which is search. It'll get what we're searching from the array. It makes that contact list, and then we'll want to step into this to check for, let's see, for matches. We'll have to step into our database. From here, it makes the matches contact list, and it will go through all of the contacts in our data to try and see if there's any that contain that letter that we input. So we just gotta keep stepping through here until we return matches. So then we're gonna go back to where we were, and then that's gonna take us back to the if statement in this case. And then so I realized that I typed lowercase m instead of capital M because it's case sensitive. So it's gonna end up going into search failed instead of search success. But if we sent over search success, that'll take us back to here. We'll in the main controller, which will then return to our communication controller so we can serialize that data and send it back to the communication controller on the client side. Alrighty, so once we sent it over from the communication controller in the server side, this will get automatically called because it's an event listener. And then so it'll make sure that we're on the right thread. It'll clear the initial search box, and then it should go through all of the contacts from what was sent over, and then it will add that to our main window. Alrighty, so once it updates the main window through this, we can then click on Mikey and then add contact. Alrighty, so then once we hit add contact, it's going to go to this event handler where I've already got the breakpoint set up. And then it's going to check to make sure that there was an index that was actually selected. And then it will convert that selected item into a string for us to work with it. And then it will check for comparisons in our contact list that we got sent over. And then it'll clear the UI. And then it's going to call our main controller. It'll keep checking for the states. It should go into, let's see, return send. Alrighty, so from the main window, we sent over state.addContact, which is then should go into this if statement. It'll separate the username and the contact name, which will then go to our communication controller on the client side. And then that will be sent to send add contact down here. It'll check if the WebSocket. Alrighty, so once we send from the client side's communication controller, it'll then go to the server's communication controller, where it split the contents up here with the array. It got the state add contact, and then alrighty, so once we're here, we'll step into this, which should take us to their main controller on the server side. And then it'll parse that to get the states from the array. It'll go and check through all of the cases to get to here. we'll get the username from the array and the contact name, and then alrighty, so then it's going to go to set the remote contact list to the database's remote list, and then it's going to do this, and we can step into there. It'll lock the threads. It'll check to see if we contain that username and contact, or if we don't contain it, sorry, and then it'll set those two lists, and then alrighty, so then it's going to check to see if they're already friends, and if they are, it'll return false. If not, it's going to add those to the list, and then we can it's going to update the contacts for each of the contacts in their lists. It'll update our login data, or it'll search, and it'll save the users, and then return true. And then we can send the user's contact, we'll get the user's, and then we can go back down here so that we can send over our contact added state and return contents back to our communication controller, where it's going to send my updated friend list and then their updated friend list. Alrighty, and then once everything's sent over back from the server's communication controller, we then have our updated friends list.